I mix what I like, what I like.
I mix what I like is exactly where you want and need to be. I mix what I like organic, vegan, soul food from your immediate diet. Live healthy.
I mix what I like, what I like.
We're here on I Mix What I Like. You may check us out on imixwhatilike.org, where you can see all these other shows and what my daddy likes and other cool things.
Yes, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here on Black Liberation Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be your host. Like, share, subscribe, support the Patreon. All the links are in the show description. Got a great show lined up for you, despite the fact that we are not live. Welcome to all the remixers who are here joining us, and to all those who will see and hear this later, welcome and peace to you as well. Going to get into some seriousness in about, I don't know exactly how long, but in a little bit, we're going to get to a great discussion that I was able to tape for today with Michelle M.L. Smith. not only talking about, as you'll see already in the show description, encouraging you already to show your support in this really last 24 hours or so to free Khalifa. And we're not only going to be talking about that case with her, but getting into her story. Got to talk with her about the life that she led that led her to the work she does now. Book ended by a discussion with her, obviously, about the push to try to save Khalifa's life. So don't feel like you need to wait. The links in the show descriptions where you can sign the petition, get the numbers to call, the emails to send, all of that, because it is a 24-hour. We're really on the clock here to try to save this brother's life. So, but that is said again. So please go ahead and begin doing that work to the extent you haven't. Share the word as you put this show in your socials, inviting others to join you, tagging I Mix What I Like, tagging Black Liberation Media. You can let folks know that they need to sign on to support Khalifa as well. All right, a couple of things. One thing I want to do is shout out an effort that I didn't get to see, but I had heard about. Going to play a clip that Jay Smooth on his platform, the legendary for some of us in hip hop circles, given his work with WBAI and the Underground Railroad, never mind his more recent career online. But Jay Smooth had an interview with some folks who had organized this past weekend's Palestinian Solidarity rap show in Seattle. And I wanted to play a clip of them talking about how they see the intersection with Black liberation, which I thought was at least a little bit of it. So I'm going to start with that, and then I didn't get a chance to do it last week, but I want to do it this morning as a sort of semi fun, because it is a little bit challenging. Look at this new story about Ezra Edelman's maybe ill-fated documentary around Prince, and I'll save as a kind of teaser what Edelman said to me when I reached out. Black Jews. But yeah, so again, welcome everybody, and let's go ahead and get into it with this clip here. Again, you can watch the full interview. I'll put the link in the show description, but I just wanted to play this clip about talking about hip hop supporting the resistance in Palestine, and this part of the conversation that Jay Smooth had with some of the folks involved with this concert that sounded like it was going to be dope. I'm sure it went well. If anybody has any, thoughts on it or was there, please let us know. But let's check some of this out here.
It's not, it doesn't look like that, but really on the root it is. There's a strong connection, and none of this mainstream stuff is gonna kill it at this point. It's just the information is out there,
Yeah, I feel like we've really turned a corner, and it's obviously bittersweet because it's been at such a terrible cost. But I feel like we've turned a corner, especially for younger generations, where there's more clarity than there's ever been. There's less fear for speaking out about it. I think that dam has been broken in a way that you're not going to be able to put back together now, I hope.
Yeah.
I mean, the dam has been broken, man, but it's a veil of safety, I'd say. I mean, we're not that far removed from the three brothers in Vermont getting shot for wearing a kufi. When this all started, the 6-year-old little boy in Illinois that got stabbed by his neighbor. Like my parents are survivors of the Nakba in 1948. My dad was 7 years old. My mom was 2. They see everything that I'm doing and they're scared out of their mind. Every time I leave the house, they ask me, do you feel like this is making a difference? Why are you putting yourself in these situations? You have kids, you have a wife. What happens if something happens to you? Like we feel like we're free. But I don't want to diminish the fact that even though these white kids are talking about it, they still walk away from a protest and they're white kids. Like I walk away from a protest and I'm still the Palestinian in the scarf walking away from that protest. So shit ain't sweet yet. Like, I'm hoping we're getting there. I mean, I feel it feels different than it ever has in history for being a Palestinian. It feels like the world is mobilized, but they're still out here gaslighting. They're still out here telling these lies, and we got presidential candidates propagating lies that have been debunked since October 7th. That puts all of us in danger. So we out here speaking, we're saying what we got to say, but we're still moving careful. We're still watching, heads on a swivel all the time, man. But if we don't ride the momentum that we got right now, we'll never get free. Like, this is it. This is the moment.
I think that's a really important, powerful perspective. And I think that goes to show why the way y'all are going about putting this event together is important in terms of putting Palestinian voices front and center, and then also standing alongside and building on that with them.
And I do want to speak just on the sorry, Kay, on the solidarity between the Palestinian and Black movements. There's a reason why there was videos coming out of Gaza, even though those children and those teenagers were under siege, when all the shit popped off at Ferguson, that there were signs that said, "I stand with Ferguson." Those were one of the first international communities that popped up that said that we stand with Baltimore and we stand with the Black liberation struggle. So there's a reason that tie is eternal, regardless of what bullshit you hear in the media today about what this and that. Like, that tie is eternal because it's the same struggle. And until we all get free, none of us get free. And I think that's most seen in the way that Palestinians react to the Black struggle and the way that Black folks react to the Palestinian struggle. We see ourselves in each other.
There's people who are making a bad faith effort to try to portray it otherwise, but we all saw the murals for George Floyd in the West Bank and in Gaza. And on the other side, like, any student of our history remembers Malcolm X, Kwame Ture speaking on what's going on over there.
Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Angela Davis, Huey Newton as well, visiting the refugee camps in Lebanon, the Black Panthers, and that affiliation has always been there. I'm glad that it's coming out.
That's real. I also want to say, though, that as much as like that history of solidarity is there right now, like, it's life or death also with Black folks in America, you know what I mean? Because everything that's happening in Palestine can happen over here, you know what I mean? The IDF is training United States police officers. The cop cities that are popping up all over the country are based off things that are happening to Palestinian people. Like, fighting for Palestinian liberation is absolutely, I feel like, a part of fighting for Black liberation. The same way our oppressors are linked up, like, our liberation is bound together.
Yeah, can y'all build a little more on that? On what the
So again, definitely check out the entire discussion in the show description, and I hope that show went well. And salute to them for doing it. And to Jay Smooth for hosting that, putting that in together and hosting that conversation. Black Jews. Speaking of Black Jews, let's come back in a quick second and talk a little bit more about Prince and this Ezra Edelman documentary. Don't go anywhere. Come on back.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right, so I'll put the link in the show description for the article, of course, because I'm not going to do it justice. The article is I have to say, very well written. It's a fascinating read, and it gets into a lot of stuff that I'm, again, not going to get to properly here. But I thought it would just be a little bit of fun just to even go through just my highlights from the article and bring up some of the points that are both fascinating and disturbing about who, for me, is became so just quickly, like, coming up in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, Prince was always around as a name. Prince, Michael Jackson has always been a competition that they obviously engaged in their real life. But it really wasn't until Mama's Biscuits, salute to the greatest funk band in Western Maryland from 1997 to 1999. And particularly my homeboys, Jeff and Parrish, who really helped evolve, not really beyond just Prince, my understanding and appreciation of music in particular, in general, but in particular Prince. And because if for like a lot of us, you were not sure how to, particularly with wanting to project a certain kind of manhood, with wanting to follow certain mythologies of masculinity. I certainly remember being, kind of like both with Michael and Prince, kind of like, you know what, there was a day, in fact, I remember listening to the radio, and apparently Michael Jackson and LL Cool J's songs "I'm Bad" came out about the same time. And I remember them having a head-to-head radio competition, playing the two songs back to back. And I just remember thinking, I can't even believe Michael Jackson would put that song out. LL clearly wins. And I do think the song was better, but I also think that at the time, LL was just representing a kind of manhood and a masculinity that was much more of interest to me than what Michael was presenting. And so that was always part of it. And then, despite what, again, and despite what we had seen with the wild dress of Parliament Funkadelic and Earth, Wind and Fire, they were still, they were still of a previous generation, really. I was too young to fully appreciate all of that. And we didn't see it as much as we see, it's still, I think for some people, it's hard to understand how little media saturation there was relative to today, where we wouldn't have seen all of it as much or as easily or as readily as we do today, in terms of all the different presentations and social media and media presence. So there was all of that, but it was in Mama's Biscuits where I remember Jeff, telling me, you got to listen beyond the popular versions of the music. You got to go dig, a little deeper. Go get these live performances. Eventually, I would go see Prince live twice, and it's a whole other. And it's odd because had I known, because I had a classic rock phase that I still appreciate in high school, that had I known Prince's proficiency with the guitar, an issue we're going to come back to, I would have been quicker to fandom. But that, even in his popular moments, was never sort of put forward. With all the good solos in Purple Rain and elsewhere, it just was not presented, of course, as a guitar rock god or whatever, or guitar god or whatever. So, all right. So we get this New York Times Magazine article, "The Prince We Never Knew: A Revealing New Documentary Could Redefine Our Understanding of the Pop Icon, but you will probably never get to see it." The article is by Sasha Weiss, who is a deputy editor of the magazine. She reported this article for a year and a half and interviewed more than 20 people. She is one of a small number of people to have seen the Prince film, and I'm really, really, I mean it. If anybody has that 6 degrees, we'll talk about Brother Edelman's response. But I'm just not close enough. I don't have enough influence to get to see, and I've never been bothered more by it than now. Anyway, slick opening too, by the way, from Sasha here. Dig, if you will, a small slice of Ezra Edelman's 9-hour documentary about Prince, a cursed masterpiece that the public may never be allowed to see. Again, I'm not doing the article justice. We're not going to get so I'm just going to go through my highlighted portions just for the sake of life and time, and it is what it is. We've talked about it actually before, this issue of the fact that Prince took the bass line out of "When Doves Cry." over a 2-day marathon recording session, who's the she here, Peggy McCreary, one of the female engineers working on the project, she and Prince were in the studio with sound, wailing guitars, thrumming keyboards, and overdubbed choir harmonizing Prince. It was a sort of maximalist stew possible only when someone is, as Prince was, a master of just about every musical instrument ever invented. But something wasn't right. So at 5 or 6 in the morning, Prince found the solution. He started subtracting. He took out the guitar solo, which I would still love to hear, by the way. He took out the keyboard. And then his boldest, most heterodox move, he took out the bass. McCreary remembers him saying with satisfaction, "Ain't nobody gonna believe I did that." He knew what he had. The song became an anthem, a platinum mega hit. And it is wild to think about that, even as we go back and listen to it, that there's no bass line. There's no guitar solo. And I do want to know what it sounded like with it, even as it is a masterpiece as it is. But as the article talks about, he grew up in some harsh environments, including the fact that, as it says here, how their musician father's face changed when he hit their mother. So Prince and his sister Tyka, is that how you pronounce her name, Nelson, had to suffer that. Never mind what the mother had to suffer that. And the way the article does it, again, I'm not doing it justice. The way the article brings it back in and weaves in and out of past, present, not justification, but explanation, context. Prince plays out. It plays out. He's that, as it says here, cut to Jill Jones, one in a long line of girlfriend muses whom Prince anointed, styled, encouraged, and criticized. One night in 1984, he started kissing the friend, and in a fit of jealousy, Jones slapped him. She says he then looked at her, that Prince looked at her and said, "Bitch, this ain't no expletive movie." Now, I always think this is funny when I read stuff like this. So why is expletive taken out? So why is the word fucking movie, I'm assuming, is taken out, but bitch is left in? Why is bitch not the expletive? I think that's a far harsher word than fucking movie. They tussled and he began to punch her in the face over and over. It's difficult to read. Shot of Prince in 1984 at the premiere of Purple Rain. A lot of good photographs in this story too. The artist who liberated so many could be pathologically controlled and controlling. So they talk about a lot of the women in particular that he helped with their career, platformed, put in groups, gave songs to, recorded, worked with, all of this. But then it often enough at least, could lead into very hostile relationships. This creature of pure sex and mischief and silky ambiguity I now saw was also dark, vindictive, and sad. This part here, and I know, particularly if you don't know the song, if you don't know the music, I do feel your life has been devalued by the lack of experience. But the song "Beautiful Ones," it's deep to. Well, behold him writhing at a microphone, shrieking out the chorus of "Beautiful Ones," a song about the pain of love. Wendy Melvoin, a member of his band in the Revolution and one of the people with whom Prince was most intimate, though only ever briefly, tells Edelman that when he's screaming when he's screaming, there is a look in his eyes of pure torture. She quotes the lyrics, "Do you want him? Or do you want me? 'Cause I want you." It feels like the biggest struggle of his entire life, Melvoin says. The consequence of you not choosing me is too much to bear. I remember in high school when I first really sat and listened to that song in a car, parked across the street from my high school, by myself, listening to that over and over and over again as I lamented the loss of a girlfriend. And it really sank in because of my own turmoil. It really sank in how powerful that song actually is. And then and I think that it's captured accurately here in this story. The sequence I just described is 20 minutes long. Imagine sustaining the density of character analysis for 520 more, which is what Edelman has done. In the process, he offers one answer to the question that has agonized the culture at large for the last decade. How should we think about artists whose moral failings are exposed? Edelman manages to present a deeply flawed person while still granting him his greatness and his dignity. Wesley Morris, a critic of at the Times and one of the small group of people who have seen the film, told me it's one of the only works I have ever seen that approximates the experience of suffering with the suffering through and alongside genius. The experience of suffering with and suffering through and alongside genius. The film took Edelman almost 5 years to finish, and it nearly broke him. Edelman told me, how can you tell the truth about someone who never told the truth about himself? That's something that is definitely a theme of this story here. That, as we'll get to when they come to it in this article, even what you think is supposed to be the most revealing parts of him are often are in the end the most curated. Over a year and a half, I had observed as Edelman continued to perfect his film, working to capture the essence of Prince, even as it became slowly, painfully clear that it would most likely never air. The Prince estate had changed hands, and the new executors objected to the project. Last spring, they saw a cut and, claiming that it misrepresented Prince, entered into a protracted battle with Netflix, which owns the rights to the film, to prevent its release. As of today, there is no indication that the film will ever come out. It has been like watching a monument being swallowed by the sea. His last film, O.J. Made in America, which won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature in 2017, is widely regarded as one of the most ambitious documentaries ever made. And as I have now felt, I do feel selfishly, what's the word? I feel, I don't know what the word is, but I feel better having been able to communicate that to him, that more than just most ambitious documentaries ever made. I think that what Edelman did with that O.J. Made in America is the best, certainly commercial film, but the best documentary on race and media in the United States that I've ever seen. And if anyone has something they think that does better as a documentary in conveying the meaning and history and function of race and media within the United States, please let me know what that is. There's Edelman there talking about it. There's a shot of his organizational board in one of his editing rooms. Edelman himself, the son of civil rights activist Marion Wright Edelman and the progressive lawyer Peter Edelman, who were the third interracial couple to marry in Virginia in 1968. Edelman grew up steeped in the history of the Black American struggle. But Prince was a mystery. And then he got access to the vault, the famous vault that we've been hearing about forever, with the thousands of songs that Prince has that never were finished, or versions we've never heard. Prince's estate, which was then being administered by a bank in Minnesota, would have no editorial influence over the project, Edelman was told. Edelman and Netflix would retain final cut. This is again as the estate changed hands. Though the estate could review the film for factual accuracy, he decided to sign on. Because initially he didn't want to do it. He didn't think it was, but then when they got those assurances, he took the gig. And I will forever be disappointed that I never saw one of these final piano and a microphone shows. The footage moved the film editors to tears. But though he would make ample use of it, Edelman knew he didn't want to make a concert film. And I believe that, actually. If you listen to even those snippets on iTunes or wherever from the early 80s, just Prince in a microphone, I could see being moved. I know it was some incredible, incredible, incredible stuff. But as we end up finding out, this so-called vault was not at all different from an Instagram account or a Facebook page. It was manicured, curated just the way Prince wanted it. And this is a shot of one of Edelman's editing bays, including this 1977 photograph of Prince. But it was apparently you don't get the reveal in the vault that many of us would have thought there was in there, that Edelman and his crew thought was in there themselves. But in talking about how he gets the interviews to do what we as viewers want them to do, we get a little bit of it here, whereas it says Edelman's collaborators spoke of his supreme skill as an interviewer, how he builds rapport with his subjects, prodding them to reveal shockingly honest feelings about their lives. His method is simple but profound: preparation and duration. He inhales every document he can, synthesizes all he learns, prepares pages of questions, and then when he is in the room with an interview subject, often for many hours at a time, sets the notes aside. He knows so much about the people he is speaking to that he disarms them, producing obscure episodes from their past that intrigue them. He is offering them a real space to talk about their experience, to really roam around and find the right words, Rosenberg told me. You see people thinking on camera and their buried memories begin to surface. The story of Prince was emerging from a story of a person bent on fame and control. From the very beginning, when he signed his first contract with Warner Brothers at age 18, he insisted on a level of independence unusual for an artist so green. They were going to set him up with Maurice White from Earth, Wind & Fire to produce the album. Prince said no. But Edelman was still finding it hard to get people to be comfortable talking about Prince because the people that Prince worked with were still afraid of him. And yet Edelman was able to complete more than 70 interviews. Another shot there, Prince, 1979. Prince's parents, John, and this part was very interesting to me. This was new for me. Prince's parents, John Nelson and Maddie Shaw, had a volatile, violent relationship. That part wasn't new, but we'll get to that in a second. Two people in the film, a youth counselor and a childhood friend, said Prince told them that Baker locked Prince in his bedroom for a period of time. The youth counselor said it was for 6 weeks, passing food through the door. When Prince emerged, according to the counselor, his ebullience was gone. He went inside. Now, was that why ebullience was on my mind the other day on the Remix Morning Show? Had I just read it here, or did I read this after? Now I can't remember. Probably I read it here when I said he was ebullient. But the ebullience of Prince was gone. Yeah, if you're locked in your room for 6 weeks, that would be a problem. Then he was thrown out when he was 14, and he stayed with various friends for many years, sleeping on a mattress in the basement of his friend Andre Simone. There was a sense that his parents couldn't apprehend his gifts, that they found his presence distasteful, and this was a deep gash in his psyche. And that's why he sings in When Doves Cry, how can you just leave me standing alone in a world so cold? He's talking to his parents. I had always taken Prince's yelps and cries as transgressive, in-your-face sexuality. Watching the film, I understood they also carried real grief. And this is a shot here with Prince and his father, who I didn't know this either, had apparently did a lot at the end of his life. They reconnected. They did a lot. His father did some shows with him, and then would eventually, and would go, dressed to the nines to performances and events, and but would eventually want to claim credit for Prince's career and even demanding some songwriting credits. In fact, it says here in the film, we see him taking credit for interviews for all Prince was, even demanding a co-writing credit for on some of the songs, angering Prince and leading to more years of estrangement. Prince grew paranoid, felt terribly alone. It wasn't until the 4th year of the project where that Edelman and Rosenberg. Oh no, I'm thinking of something else. So Oh, wait, no, wait a second. So I got to do something. I got to stop here for a quick second and pull up something else because I had actually looked at a couple of different articles in addition to this one, and I forgot where I read uh, where I read what. So I want to stop here on this point about his parents because there is something that I just did not know. Or let's see. Um, so I read. Let me just pull them up here real quick. Almost. So this was one of the articles that I read from 2022. Matthew Vounds, University of Maryland. All right, go ahead. Prince in the post-civil rights era, Black music aesthetic. And in this article, Valnez says, I argue that by incorporating elements like improvisation and call and response, Prince and his band situate their approach to post-civil rights era Black popular music aesthetics within the trajectory of Black music. So in the New York Times magazine piece, we hear about Prince's parents and their hostile, volatile relationship. And I believe we'll come back to it. Now I can't remember where all these pieces were. I believe they may mention that in the film Purple Rain, if folks remember, his parents are depicted as an interracial couple. So for a long time, I actually thought Prince was mixed or so-called biracial or whatever terms people are using today. Some of us even used to say black with a white mother, but whatever makes people comfortable. That's what I thought he was. But that's not the case. Well, maybe not obviously, but we've come to learn later that that's not the case. And it has, but what I didn't know is exactly, maybe we could figure it out, but why he would have done that. But one of his issues was that he was always very conscious of how he was racialized and how his racialization was meant to play in the public sphere. And in this article, he's if I'm not mistaken, this is the one he's made to look a little bit more calculated, where he tells his early PR people and what is it? Recording. What am I trying to say? The music industry folks that he's working with. Don't make me black. Prince uttered this striking statement to Lenny Warren Waronker, an artist and repertoire A&R representative for Warner Brothers, during a studio demonstration shortly after signing his initial contract with the record company in June 1977. The way that Prince represented himself extended beyond the way that his music was marked. In the film Purple Rain, his character had a black father and a white mother, and in rare interviews that he did, Prince would sometimes describe himself and members of his family in ways that suggested he was biracial. Prince faced the dilemma of assimilation or self-determination that was a hallmark of post-civil rights era Black culture. Prince presented himself as a mixed-race artist and one who had a multiracial and multigendered band to not only represent the kind of world he wished to create, but also a way to gain access to the mainstream market. Later in his career, however, Prince addressed issues that faced members of the Black community more directly. So that is the part I was looking for. And I'll admit, when I read that, I was a little offended. Like, why are you playing with my experience to try to make a point about unifying the world? I've always hated when people made that argument, as they used to do, particularly when I was growing up as a kid. There was those old songs where, what was it, Free to Be You and Me and all that kind of stuff, that were trying to present this. And I never liked it. I won't claim to have some advanced politics at the time, but I think what was germinating in those moments was I was like, you're playing games. It's one thing to have for people to meet and fall in love and to have their experiences. It's another when you start trying to play games with this experience to try to project and to try to create, in this case, a very liberal milquetoast world of universality and melting pot. I've just never liked that. So to read that for me is not as disturbing as the violence, obviously, against women and whatnot. But it was one of the more disturbing elements for me. I admit that I was, I get you, you want to do if you want to expand the meaning of Blackness in terms of how you express yourself and all that, I'm cool. But to falsely present an attempt to biracialize or multiracialize yourself so that you can distance yourself from Blackness to appeal to a broader audience, I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. All right, so I did want to at least bring that part in real quick. Okay, all right, so let's get back to the to the matter at hand here. Yeah, I don't like that at all. But that was yeah. Okay. Grew paranoid. Okay. Now this was also very interesting. The relationship. First of all, I didn't know. Honestly, just didn't know that Wendy and Lisa themselves had a relationship. I didn't know that, as we find out in this article, that this both made Prince kind of, I guess, excited and jealous. And then he started dating the twin sister of Wendy and ended up using that, as it's described in this article, as a way to undermine their relationship and even their sexuality. It gets really weird. But Edelman did, the point of this part of the article, it points out, it took him 4 years to get Wendy and Lisa to sit down and be part of the interview. And you can't do the documentary without them. And I would have to agree. Like, you can't really tell Prince's story. And especially now that I've learned more about them in this piece here, that they really had a lot to do musically and emotionally with Prince. And he did a number on them too. I mean, this was an interesting part here. Coleman, and that is Lisa Coleman, Wendy Malvoin and Lisa Coleman. And they talk about, Coleman talked about applying makeup to his back acne before going on stage and intuiting how alone he sometimes felt, strutting around half naked. I felt his vulnerability because he was going out on stage to take off his coat and be sexy. So there is that there you and I'm again not doing it justice, but this article does a really good job, as I'm sure the documentary does, of bringing that out. That he's on the one hand shy, but also on the other hand, and he's somewhat shy and self critical and but also deeply desirous of being a superstar and being in control of of his image and his work. But the idea that you're going to go out and walk around half naked, but you still feel the need and recognize the need to put makeup on your back knee is crazy. I mean, it's just, yeah, he became romantically involved with Melvoin's identical twin, Susanna, another of Prince's muses, who was co-lead of The Family, one of the many bands he created. When they moved in together, she told Edelman he monitored her phone calls and discouraged her from leaving the house. He tried to prevent her from seeing Wendy, who had told Prince in essence that if he messed with Susanna, he was messing with them both. Yet neither can divorce herself from sympathy. That is, Wendy and Lisa still have a lot of sympathy for him. He was a marginalized kid, Susanna says. He was also trying to find his worth. And I guess that's Lisa, Wendy, and Susanna, the twin. All of them apparently felt this way. Where do I belong? Who's going to accept me? Who's going to take me as I am? In these women, he had found that acceptance, collaboration, love. It's heartrending to watch as he destroys it. When members of the revolution tried to negotiate for higher pay, according to Coleman, he told them that they wouldn't ask for more money if they really loved him. Wow. A pattern in his working relationships, another person who worked for Prince told me. Wow. But at the same time, he was known as a bolsterer of women. He had a long list of collaborators with complex, sexy, mysterious personas of their own. And then he talks about how Prince, that is, this article talks about, so Sasha Weiss talks about how Edelman talks about Prince's affinity for this person, this intersex woman of 19th century French, I guess, infamy, Herculine Barbin, in whose voice he sometimes sang. He wrote about his fluidity. I'm not a woman. I'm not a man. I am something that you'll never understand. Then he also is in the next line, I'd never beat you. I'd never lie. But okay, so all right, well, or is it cheat you? Lyrics for I would die for you. I'm not your love, I'm not your friend, you'll never comprehend. I'm not a sinner. Where is the line? Yeah, I'll never beat you. I'll never lie. And if you're evil, I'll forgive you by and by, because you. Well, so he would beat a few, apparently. Although I'm not sure. I think the one we read is the only accusation of physical violence. I think the rest, a lot of it is emotional, verbal. I think I'm right about that. But again, the link is in the show description, so feel free to check me on that. Now, this part was not, this part was, yeah, I'm not, over time, Edelman and his team interviewed many of Prince's proteges from the 90s and 80s, Jill Jones, Carmen Electra, Robin Power, Anna Fantastic, Sheila E., and others. They were muses, girlfriends, baby dolls, many of them getting involved with him as teenagers, though he was careful not to sleep with them until they turned 18. Yeah, that don't woo. That is not, that just, one of the most disturbing parts of the film depicts Prince's relationship with Maite Garcia. Forgive me for not knowing how to pronounce her name, who became his wife, and who met when she was 16 and he was 35. They were not able to have children. They lost their baby shortly after the child was born. And then he even used the heartbeat in the song for Sex in the Summer. And went right back to performing. And in fact, right here, just days after the baby died, they shot the music video for the song Bet You By Golly Wow. Bet You By Golly Wow. Jordy. I mean, in which they embrace in a hospital bed. So they talk about how Garcia, she went through all kinds of trauma with losing the child. The relationship didn't go well. He was, again, at least verbally abusive and hostile. They talk about when they sat down for an interview with Oprah. Garcia tells Edelman, I could barely look at her. I just kept looking at him, help me keep it together. Because this is just shortly after they lost their baby. Oprah inquires about the status of her pregnancy. Prince had told Garcia not to say that the baby died, so she says nothing. After an awkward beat, he answers for her, well, our family exists. We're just beginning it, and we've got many kids to have. Wow. This is a picture of them together in 1999. This was the start of a period when Prince neglected, betrayed, and ultimately abandoned the marriage. But the mode of the film is not to linger in judgment. It's to probe, to try to make narrative sense out of the disparateness of Prince's personality, in part by showing how his memory lives in the people who knew him. Edelman allows us to see her own myth-making, that is, Garcia's, because she cannot bring herself to condemn him. a motherless, fatherless child who longed to be protected by a family of his own that he was not able to put together, which leads him to falling under the sway of an ersatz father figure, the musician Larry Graham, who insinuated himself into Prince's life and instilled in him Jehovah's Witness theology. That I didn't know either. So those are the shows I saw when Larry Graham was playing bass of Graham Central Station, of Sly and the Family Stone, Fame, I'm playing the bass guitar, yo. I mean, so to see him take on this father figure role and bring Prince into the Jehovah's Witness thing was wild. I did not know that. By the spring of 2023, Edelman and his team had assembled a cut of the film that was 9 hours long, and they were still obsessively editing it, still trying to calibrate Prince's many sides while also allowing the viewer to luxuriate in the utter genius of his performances. But even as they continued their work, the project was being obstructed by Prince's estate. Of the many bafflements of Prince, one was most haunting is his failure to leave a will. He did get his masters back. In the film, he refers to them as his children. So how could it be that he left no plan for their posterity? Was it the ultimate act of control, a reflection of his distrust of lawyers and contracts, or was it his final act of abandonment of himself, of his own work? After he died, his estate, which was divided among his sister Taika and 5 siblings, was plunged into chaos. When Netflix negotiated the deal for the documentary, a court had placed the estate, which owed millions in back taxes, under the administration of Comerica Bank and Trust. But in 2022, after years of legal battles at Minnesota court divided Prince's estate between Primary Wave, a music company to whom 3 of Prince's heirs had sold their shares, and Prince Legacy LLC, composed by the other 3 heirs, and L. Lundell McMillan, a lawyer who had worked with Prince in the 1990s and 2000s, and Charles Spicer, a music producer. There's Prince with the famous word slave written on his cheek when he was in his battle with Warner Brothers. The guitar is the love symbol. Questlove, of course, got to see the film and then would be so moved by it that it led him back to his therapist in a bunch of tears. Now, okay, so this was the part here that I did enjoy also reading, by the way. We talked a little bit about it on the morning show last week. In terms of the film, you could feel the collective wonder in the room at the end of the penultimate chapter of the film when Edelman presents the story behind Prince's famous guitar solo during While My Guitar Gently Weeps on the night he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004. I encourage people to, even if you need to do it now and maybe juxtapose this section of our video here with the song. If not, definitely go listen to it again. I'm going to, as soon as I finish recording this, I'm going to play it again. I love it that much, and it's good to be reminded of just how dope it was and to see it again in this new context. So the night is 2004. He plays the song written by George Harrison of the Beatles, When My Guitar Gently Weeps. And as is written here, one video of the performance promoted by the Hall of Fame was viewed more than 29 million times on YouTube. After Tom Petty, Steve Winwood, Jeff Lynne, and Danny Harrison have played through most of the reverential rendition of the song, Prince emerges from the wings in a black suit and red bowler hat. I want to stop here for a quick sec because when you watch the video, he's there the whole time. He's just standing on the side. He's playing his backing rhythm guitar part. He's doing the whole thing the whole time. So it's not really that he emerges so much from the wings, but he's there the whole time. Black suit, red bowler hat, poker faced, and plays a solo of such intricacy and mournfulness that the other players shake their heads and grin with admiration. On his face it's a supreme expression of Prince's superiority and bravura. But the film gives it a new context. Questlove on screen talks about his disbelief the previous year when Rolling Stone made a list of 100 greatest guitar players of all time and Prince was left off it. Prince nursed these kinds of slights, and his commandeering of the stage at an event associated with Jan Wenner and Rolling Stone was in part an act of revenge. There's spite and aggression in the performance, but there's also pain in his wincing face, his apartness, a small soigné black man on stage with these rumpled white rockers. I did go look up soigné, well-dressed black man on stage with these rumpled white rockers. Edelman juxtaposes the first moments of the solo with wisps of the past, calling back to earlier images. Here's Prince jumping up again to be seen behind his peers. Here's Prince as a baby held by his mother, and we hear his voice saying, "I ran away when I was 12. We know from the sequence before this one that his parents had recently died. And we also find out that Prince would watch this performance over and over. Prince died on April 21st, 2016 at age 57 of a fentanyl overdose, alone in an elevator at Paisley Park. His death was presaged in lyrics of "Let's Go Crazy." Tell me, he yowls, are we gonna let the elevator bring us down? Oh no, let's go. Leaving his friends to wonder if he had somehow planned it, fulfilling his own prophecy, orchestrating his mythology until the end. In his final moments of the film, Edelman gives him to us in his glory, sitting at a piano and singing "The Ladder," a song, but also a prayer. Everybody's looking for the ladder. Everybody wants salvation of the soul. It's such a beautiful song. It is such a beautiful song. I know. Oh man. Yeah, I know he was killing it with that. Everything's here in the film. His genius, his majestical, he's majestical, he's sexual, he's flawed, he's trash, he's divine, he's all those things. And man, wow. Questlove said that he went home that night after seeing the film, called his therapist, and cried so hard he couldn't see. A certain level of shield, we could call it masculinity or coolness. The idea of cool, the mere idea of cool, was invented by Black people to protect themselves in this country, he said. But we made it sexy. We can take dark emotion and make that cool too. This, particularly for Black men, a facade of invincibility. It's hard to bear. It's a burden. The estate wanted him to take out the elevator reference in the film. They had 17 notes demanding changes. Edelman tried to reach a compromise, but they wanted to take out the part of Wendy's interview where she talks about Prince calling her up after he became more religious to ask her to renounce her homosexuality as a precondition for getting the band back together. They wanted to clean up what are said to be anti-Semitic lyrics in the 2000 album Rainbow Children, which is a masterpiece of an album. When that album came out, I actually said at the time to whoever was listening to me, particularly on my radio CPR pirate radio show. But my argument then was that Prince came out with this album to remind everybody in this neo-soul era who was still the man out here. So I was saying, with all due respect to the D'Angelos and the Music, Soul Childs, and what's the other brother, Bilal's, and all of them, to Maxwell. It was like I took it as, because the album is so soulful. It is so nasty. But there is a part, and so there's a song called "Family Name," and this is the part that I looked up was said to be the controversy. In the song "Family Name" on that album, there is a reference. It makes the point of, you still have your family name, and I've lost mine through enslavement. And there are references to names that would be associated with Jews. Something like Perlman or Hoffman, or I forgot the exact names. And it was suggested that this was part of his record executive battle and industry battle and so on and so forth. But Edelman refused to take this stuff out, insisting that that phase of Prince's life demanded explanation. How could an artist who talked about freedom and inclusiveness also profess these kinds of beliefs? It wasn't the entirety of Prince, but it was an important part of his trajectory. I don't know. I mean, it's the album. When you look at those lyrics, I think it reminds me that poem from Amiri Baraka years ago that people often associated with anti-Semitism, because in it he takes a shot at Jews in his course of taking a shot at also liberal Catholics and Irish and other semi-oppressed or relatively semi-oppressed white groups. And I've always bristled at that these would be dismissed as anti-Semitic, even if they are critical of the role some Jews play. But to Edelman's point, whether you agree or disagree or have a critique of it or not, I think that should be in the. If Prince had issues, I mean, if Prince is telling his people, you gotta renounce your homosexuality for us to get the band together, and if he has a lyric that some at least accused him of anti-Semitism, it should be in the film. But the two sides can't get together, and then they even put out a hashtag no 9-hour hit job, calling the film a hit job, which is unfortunate. So if George Washington, who was allowed to stand as an unquestioned national hero for centuries before anyone focused on how he stole dentures from his slaves' mouths, why can't we, from an actual genius, an actual legend, an actual positive contributor to humanity, why can't we get him, even in all of his flaws, in a film? And I know that even if people want to protect his image and we get some negative things about him in it, I'm convinced off of Made in America alone, I'm convinced Edelman would have done it justice in terms of the quality of presentation in the film. So I don't feel like it could be dismissed as just some hit job that you might find in some of these interesting edits you see on other platforms and wherever else about whoever. But now it's interesting that I had just talked not too long ago about a Danzy Senna piece that I had never heard of this author, but this is a New York Times crew click here clearly that I've never wanted to be part of until now, because I want to see this documentary, and apparently they're all getting to see it. But Danzy Senna, who has written a lot apparently in the piece that I covered on multiraciality, and is a friend of Edelman's. And who saw the film, told me how moved she was by the length of it, the bigness of it. Black genius doesn't get that treatment. We would treat Mozart this way. So in other words, defending the 9-hour length of it. I was not thrilled to see that Steve James, the director of Hoop Dreams, is also co-signing the film, because I'm not a fan of Hoop Dreams. And I always remember, I've always agreed with Bell Hooks' critique of that film, this voyeuristic film into Black life that white filmmakers get to have careers off of, while these two Black boys go back into relative obscurity and whatever else. But nonetheless, the question here is, did Netflix fail to protect Edelman's film as symbolic, discouraging changes in the documentary field? let me read that. I'm sorry. As word of the project's dissolution began to spread, a number of executives and filmmakers I spoke with, most of whom requested to remain anonymous to preserve relationships in the industry, saw Netflix's failure to protect Edelman's film as symbolic of discouraging changes in the documentary field. Netflix, which is still one of the biggest platforms for documentaries, has in recent years moved away from the kind of prestigious, provocative films that help make the company's reputation toward content that is inexpensive to make and appeals to a global audience. A Netflix representative offered the following statement: "This documentary project has proved every bit as complex as Prince himself. We have meticulously archived Prince's life and worked hard to support Ezra's series, but there are still meaningful contractual issues that with the estate, including the point that they said in writing that they have a legal right to keep it under 6 hours, and that's the part they're using to hold up the film at this point. But there still are meaningful contractual issues with the estate that are holding up the documentary release. I wrote back to ask if it was possible that Edelman's film could still come out at some point, or whether, as some sources speculated to me could happen, another director might be hired to cut it down to make a version more pleasing to the estate. Netflix declined to comment." Edelman had continued to tinkering with the film, redefining the score, changing transitions. The people around him often spoke about his maniacal precision and drive, and several of them compared him to Prince. There's Prince. And it talks about in the article, he was actually very nice at basketball and just was a little bit bothered by his height. Prince's sharp angles softened somewhat as he grew older. He had taken on the mantle of elder, championing younger musicians, especially women, whose work he sometimes discovered online. At the urging of his friend Cornel West, the academic and activist and lively presence in the film, he addressed the politics and injustice more directly than he ever had. In the film, we see footage of a concert Prince gave in Baltimore in 2015 after the police killing of Michael Brown and the death of Freddie Gray, where he tells the grieving crowd, "I am your servant this evening. I am your housemaid. I love each and every one of you." In the last months of his life, Prince did a series of lo-fi concerts he called his piano and a microphone tour, footage from which forms the spine of the film's final hours. Prince wears a sparkling purple jumpsuit, his natural hair in a large afro, the way he wore it when he first was starting out. He sits at a piano accompanying himself without a band, singing epic ballads like Sometimes It Snows in April and Anesthesia. Sometimes It Snows in April's got to be one of the most beautiful songs ever written. And then it says here, Prince would leave the stage to cry, drink some tea, and go back on again. That's a great shot right there. Sometimes It Snows in April. Chronic pain dogged him. Decades of wild athletic performance, sequences of leaps and twirls and full splits and 4-inch high-heeled boots took their toll. People around him testify in the documentary to his decades-long dependence on pain medication. When he died on when he died on that elevator in a box within the box of Paisley Park, he was sealed in completely alone. At the end of his life, several people who knew him told me Prince was more open, more willing to acknowledge his shortcomings and share aspects of his pain, but he couldn't get all the way there. Couldn't admit the extent of his dependency on pain pills, couldn't allow his old friends to see him in his suffering, couldn't make a plan for his legacy. Hey. Again, I encourage you all to read the article for yourself. It's very well written, fascinating, and I've not done it justice here, even though we've covered some of the fascinating highlights. And as I promised, I did reach out in the hope against hope that I could get Ezra Edelman to come through and do an interview. And without reading verbatim what he sent, he was appreciative of the invitation. But as the article says, there's a brokenness after this process that I think he's needing some still more time to deal with. And I get it. I get it. He gave the interview in the circles he needed to give, in the circles in which he's moving. But I did, at least get to tell him that I do. I think Made in America is the best film, best documentary I've seen on race and media in this country. It is so much more than a film about OJ, which is why I know what he did here for Prince is magnificent. And the idea that we won't get to see it is crazy. It's super frustrating. And it is also weird to think that on some level, Netflix, up until the end point there, and the details are a little more complicated than I'm again doing justice, giving room for here. But the idea that Netflix in some cases almost comes off better than the people running his estate, whose interests I don't know are in best service of Prince, and more importantly, the best service of the rest of us. Why should we be denied what has got to be a genius film just because a few people in his inner circle, or who claim to be in his inner circle, are going to not like it? That's at least my biased view. Obviously, if I maybe was on the other side of that, I feel differently. But maybe if I got to see the film, I could make a better judgment. So whether it's Netflix, Edelman, or the estate, anybody want to let me see the joint, I'll give an objective review. No, I hope we get to see it. Shout out to Ezra Edelman, Black Jews, and let's I hope we get to see this film, because more Prince was, anyway. Sometimes it snows in April.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
That's right. So now that you've rung the bell and done all the liking, subscribing, sharing, putting in the socials, all of those things, you've supported the Patreon, you've whatever you can do. Definitely reach out and let folks know to get in here now if they're not, because we're about to get into this conversation with Michelle M.L. Smith about freeing Khalifa, her life. Fascinating discussion. So you definitely get your morning drink of preference, and get comfortable, and let's get into it. All right, everybody. As promised, joining us once again, Michelle M.L. Smith, who, among many other things, is co-director of Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty, MADPMO. All the links and a more full bio will be in the show description. In fact, I'm just going to copy and paste the show description from Millennials Are Killing Capitalism and put it in there. Have the same thing with all the information. So shout out to them, salute to them, and welcome back. It's good to see you.
It is definitely good to see you as well. And thank you once again for having me on. Appreciate it.
So with your permission, what I thought I would like to do is start with sort of sandwich everything, do the business end, get to your bio, because that I'm very anxious to hear a little bit about, and then that is your story, and then close it out again with the business. So obviously the business of the day is we got to stop Khalifa from being killed, assassinated, basically. So could we start with that business, and then we'll sort of work backwards to try to hear a little bit about your story as to how you got to be doing this work. But if you would just tell us a little bit about who Khalifa is and why we need to be involved with saving his life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ball. So Khalifa, Marcellus Williams, his government name, but his Islamic name is Khalifa. He is a Black Muslim man who is on death row in Missouri. Khalifa was convicted in 2001 for a brutal murder of a woman who was a reporter for our largest paper. So this case, got a lot of coverage at the time. the murder happened in 98, but he was convicted in 01. And during that time, and since then, he has maintained his innocence. But also, once some evidence came out, once more testing was done, once the case was delved into a little bit further, it is honestly conclusively known that he is innocent. There is nothing that convicts him, as far as the evidence at the scene of the crime. So with him being convicted and put on death row, his attorneys and himself have been fighting for nearly 24 years. This is his third scheduled execution date. Missouri is a very bloodthirsty place to live. And so despite the evidence, despite the prosecutor's push to free him, our state is pushing forward with this execution Tuesday. And so we need people, we need community, we need all over the country to stand up in this moment because, we're just tired. We're tired of the injustices. We're tired of the killings. We're tired of poor and Black folks getting subjected to extrajudicial murders with no consequences. So this is definitely a time for everyone to stand up and, make their voices heard. And we hope it reverberates across the state, across the country. And also, we really are hoping that the legal team and their expertise will have success in court.
Yeah, just quickly, because I heard you talk a little bit about this on the remix last week, and it just sounds so wild that even as you just mentioned in passing here, that the prosecutor is even saying, and
Yeah.
forgive me, I just feel like we don't often hear very often the prosecutor saying, I think there's a problem with my case, and I think we shouldn't, could you just quickly, what is that, and what is the beef, and why isn't the prosecutor being listened to all of a sudden?
And I love that word beef because it's definitely beef between the local and the state. So, over the last probably 10 years, these units have been popping up all over the country. Mostly they're called conviction review units, conviction integrity units, and they're normally offices of the prosecutor, right, where they are tasked with reviewing past convictions and seeing if these people are innocent. Our system ain't perfect, so a lot of people are wrongfully convicted. And so there was a push to create these offices across the country, and in many places have them. And so in our prosecutor's office, he has what he calls conviction and incident review unit. So this unit has been tasked with reviewing, cases of innocence or wrongful conviction, constitutional violations. And they took this case up a couple years ago. And as of this past January, after reinvestigating DNA testing, et cetera, of the prosecutor, our current prosecutor office came back and said, yeah, this person's innocent. Like this evidence does not hold up today. Actually, it proves that he's innocent. And our office back in 2001 got it wrong. And so he is trying to fix something that the previous prosecutor did. And, it is definitely amazing that the beef, the contention right now is mainly government officials, the local prosecutor, and then our state attorney general. Those are the main two factions, arguing. Now, of course, Khalifa's attorneys are in the middle of that too, but it is definitely a situation where local prosecutors are trying to right the wrongs of the past, and state attorney general is trying to stop that.
Wow. Yeah. All right. So please, everybody, even as you continue watching this this morning and whenever, please check the links in the show description and start getting your phone calls and emails ready and all of that to make this last real heavy push. Because we only have a couple. Well, by the time this comes, we're only gonna have like 24 hours at the point, right? If at the time this comes out on Monday. So waste no time. If you haven't already done something, you can always come back to this if you need to. Just go ahead and get into the links, and
definitely. And we're definitely asking people to do what they can, sign all the things, petitions, call the governor, text the governor, not text, email, tweet the governor. People have been tagging the office on IG, sharing different graphics, etc. So all the things we are really encouraging people to do. But also with the execution happening on Tuesday, we are asking people, especially people in Missouri, right, to show up. I created this like hashtag a couple of years ago, and I want to build it out. But I created this thing that I call "Show Up for Black Life," because I feel like when we talk about Black Lives Matter and defend Black lives, etc., you know, the first part of that is we got to show up for Black life. And not Black death, right? We show up for Black death all the time, but like when it's a situation where we can show up for the life of a person, we need to do that. So we are asking people in Missouri to come out Tuesday between our state capitol and then the prison where executions are held. We are definitely asking people to also show up and speak out. We have almost 1 million signatures, over 900,000 right now, and we're asking for more signatures and definitely more support.
All right. Well, let's go. So I did, and we'll come back to this as a reminder before we wrap. But I did, you know, I've heard you tell a few bits and pieces here and there in the numbers of interviews you've given, and I know I've missed more elsewhere. So forgive any ask of repetition. But I am interested in just generally in people's lives to a certain extent. I'm interested in how people get to where they got or get to where they are. And so I wanted you to take a moment, if you would, and just tell a little bit of your story, how, you know, where you were born, how did you go from young Michelle to the powerful ML doing this work, you know, like how, you know, what led you to this, Yeah.
You know, it definitely was a ride, definitely was a journey. So I am born and raised in St. Louis, first of all. I mean, our phrase here is St. Louis versus everybody, right? So I am very much St. Louis through and through. I was raised in the projects of St. Louis. So I come from a family, you know, we were definitely poor. We were struggling. I lived on the 8th floor of a 9-floor high rise for most of my childhood. Now I went to schools that were, you know, didn't have a lot of the resources that other schools had, etc. And so I definitely had a difficult, you know, childhood as far as that goes. But, you know, I had, you know, my mom was good. My dad, he was all right. But I definitely had, you know, a loving home. But it was definitely a lot of struggle. I saw a lot of things when I was growing up. I mean, coming up in the 80s, right, was, you know, crack hit us a little bit later than the East Coast or West Coast, but it did hit in around the Midwest. So I saw a lot of different things. I saw a lot of my people going to jail, going to prisons. You know, I have a lot of people I grew up with who went away when they were 16, 17. So it was definitely a situation where I knew something was wrong, even when I was young. Like I didn't have the words, right? But I knew like white supremacy, right? I knew like, you know what I'm saying, inequities. I knew these things, but I just didn't have words for them. And but I was also like the smartest kid, not only in my class, in my school. Like we would do testing. Do you remember those standardized testings, like the what was it called? The cat test or something?
That I don't remember, but the scantrons with the filling in the circles and all that. Yeah. I remember them. And shout out to you for doing well. I think I below failed those joints because I just remember filling stuff out, like just making pictures in the with the seriously, it was bad. Yeah, anyway,
it was bad, but you just wasn't worried about it, huh? That's too funny. So yeah, so I did well on those tests. Like I always got the highest scores in my school, in my city. I was always given awards, and I was considered, you know, the smart kid who was supposed to excel. But what I realized later is you have to take potential and you have to manifest it, right? Just having potential doesn't do anything. You actually have to make sure you manifest it, you support it. You know, there is a system around people with potential to allow them to reach those heights. And I just didn't have that system of support. I just didn't have that behind me. So as quote unquote smart as I was, I still ended up at 17 and pregnant. You know, I still ended up, you know, working in fast food when I was, you know, 18, 19, 20. I still ended up suffering. So I really hate the word potential because that's all I heard all my life. Like, oh, you can do this. You can be a doctor. You can be a lawyer, so on and so forth. But it was like I just didn't have the resources to meet, you know, to meet those things. And so that was kind of, my early years. I had my son, like I said, when I was 18. He was born. And I spent several years struggling. I went to school, college on and off, working full time. And although I knew suffering and struggle, I didn't necessarily know incarceration, because I knew people went to prison, but I didn't hear from nobody. People went to prison,
Right.
They were just out of sight, out of mind, right? But it was a lot of struggles going on anyway. So later on in life, when I was in my 30s, I ended up being charged with a crime. Now, when you don't have access to resources, when you don't understand, the criminal legal system, you can get caught up in, oh, this is just a mistake, and I just got to prove I didn't do it, and everything will be okay. Right. That ain't, listen, when I say that ain't the way it go,
I'm trying
no.
to
That's not the way it go at all.
at all.
So I was like, oh, this happened. Okay, I can explain it. And I could.
Right.
Like, I can explain it. And, but the system is the system. The system be systeming, right? And so I was criminalized. I was probably 32, 33. I was criminalized. And I was offered probation. Oh, just take this plea of probation. You'll be fine. It'll go away in a couple of years, et cetera. I was like, okay, because I didn't know any better. And that happened. So probably 2 years later, I actually got very sick. And when I got sick, I was hospitalized, and I didn't go see my PO, which started this whole, domino effect of being reported to the judge, going before the judge. Basically the judge is like, oh, you didn't report to the PO. He thought I was just being, smart ass, for the lack of a better term. Right. And, the judge basically told me to go to prison for 5 years. And they went from, probation. They didn't do any kind of ankle monitor. There was 3 or 4 things they could have did between probation and sending me to prison. But the judge in small town Missouri decided, no, you want to smart ass people. So you just take your, go to prison. So in 2012, I went to.
I think once upon a time they called that uppity.
Yes, the uppity Negro. Right, exactly. Yeah. It didn't make any sense. Even when I was in court, none of it made any sense. So so I was sent to prison in 2012. I had a 5-year sentence, and it was actually over $9,000. That's a whole nother story for another day. But it was over $9,000. I got 5 years, and I just didn't understand. Like when you get to a point.
I mean, it's supposed to be for today. You can save it for your memoir if you want to, but that's what I'm.
Well, it's literally like hours. So to summarize, it's hours. It's hours. To summarize, it was over a student loan. I was in a college. I went to a private college. And that next semester, I had exhausted my student loans and grants or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So I wasn't able to finish. And I would have been done that next year in college. Mm-hmm. And so, but I didn't have, I didn't have anybody to co-sign a loan. I didn't have anybody I didn't have a lot of support. Mm-hmm. My parents didn't have credit, whatever. Mm-hmm. So a friend of mine, that's why I don't trust people. That's why I don't trust people right now. A friend of mine was like, oh, my dad will co-sign for you, because we were both in church at the time. Her dad was a deacon. She was like, oh, my family knows that about you, because we were good friends at college. And she was like, oh, my dad will do that, just co-sign the loan, and because money went to the school. So it wasn't like we got any money to spend. The school, the school cost $9,000. It was $9,000 a semester. And so, but what happened was, here's the thing, she was trying to help me, but she had basically went in our college had like a computer system where you went in and signed stuff and all that for the loans and stuff. So she went into my account and put her dad's info on my loan, and the school got the loan and paid for my loan. But later down the line, when her dad saw this loan on his credit, he didn't know what the hell it was, right? So, and I didn't know, I didn't think to follow up. I just wasn't thinking that but like I said, she was trying to help me, but she shouldn't have did that anyway. But so the dad wanted to get off my loan, which he got off the loan. It was my loan, but they felt like I committed fraud. So they're like, oh, you committed fraud on a student loan for $9,000. I'm like, I actually didn't. Because I didn't know the man's information. I didn't know him to even put his information in the loan. But that's kind of how that went.
Oh man, yeah, so, no, I get it. Yeah.
So over $5,000 in Missouri is considered a felony, right? So I was charged
Yeah.
with the B felony and carried a sentence of up to like 10 to 20 years. I got 5 years, and I went to prison over $9,000 student loan. And here's the thing too, I still got to pay it back. Going to prison don't like make you still got to pay. You still got to pay it back. But so that
They
was
don't
kind
take any of it off after doing 5.
listen. I ended up doing 3.5. So I didn't do the whole 5. I did 3.5.
Oh well, I mean, well,
Yeah.
well, in that case, then you might as no. I mean, wow, that's. I mean, it's
Yeah, so that was,
consistent. I don't know what I'm acting surprised for. It's just consistent. It's just always wild the new stuff they work in. It's just
and see, during this time too, you got to understand back in 08, 09, Bernie Madoff had just stole all the rich people money. So everything considered fraud, embezzlement, credit card, check fraud, they were going hard about it in court because Bernie Madoff had just stole these rich people money. So like that was the big thing. Because then back in the 80s, remember, it was all the child daycares was molesting all kids.
That's right. All
you know. So in the 90s, it's like for real.
So you and Bernie, it was you and Bernie, ML and Bernie running amok in the financial sector.
Yes, and I know a few people that got 5 years behind, like writing bad checks and stuff. I know several people that was in prison with me for that, because that's why I had to look into it. I'm like, why is everybody getting all this time for these monetary, non-violent, right, fraud or investment or whatever cases? But it literally like was because it was such a frenzy behind Bernie Madoff. So that was kind of why the prosecute, because he didn't even have to prosecute me. It wasn't even something to like pay the money back, right? So,
but it's always been that way, right? If they let everybody out who's committed a nonviolent crime or been accused of a nonviolent crime, it's damn near empty at this point. I mean, relatively speaking, it's just it's
very much so,
So that's
most people are incarcerated for crimes that are considered nonviolent, or now they're taking violence and adding things like burglary of a home, even if nobody at home. That's still considered they're making stuff violent that's not actually violent too.
All right.
So that's kind of
but what we all know as regular people, as real human beings, what is actually violent and not violent. Not to say that is not an act that might cause trauma on someone whose home has been burglarized. I'm not trying to whatever. But to equate that with physical violence is now we're doing a lot. So
exactly.
But okay.
But that's what they're doing. So the system, created a frenzy, and a lot of people got caught up in it. And so that's kind of so I can kind of blame Bernie Madoff for me and some more people getting locked up.
How about that?
That started it. So it was an interesting, crazy story. So like when I was incarcerated, first thing I wanted to do was figure out why, because it made no sense, right? So I'm like, okay, what the hell is happening right now? So as soon as I get to prison, I go to the library, because I've always been a reader, etc. So I go to the library. I started studying the law, studying criminal code, criminal statutes, etc., and trying to figure out what they did to me. And then figuring out, and I figured out that they did violate my rights. I should have went from probation to a harsher form of supervision, like house arrest, something like that. Those are the steps. But that's not what I got. So I kind of, tried to figure that out. And in the midst of me figuring that out and working at the library, I became a law clerk, or what we call a jailhouse lawyer. And I started helping other women, right? I helped women with things like getting time served on their sentences that they had did in jail, helping them file for divorce, helping them try to keep their kids. Because if you're incarcerated for over 2 years here anyway, they try to take your kids from you. So I just started helping other women who didn't understand the law, who didn't feel like they had a voice, because I'm always, like I am now, this been me, right? I'm always loud. I'm always the person who, if it's a problem, I got something to say about it. So, so I kind of started helping other people studying the law. That's kind of how I met my partner as well, because he was a jailhouse lawyer in the prison he's in. And so the legal system became my thing. It became okay, I need to do something about this. So that's kind of how I got into the area overall. And then when I in 2020, I heard about this job of in a death penalty organization. So I was like, I guess I'll apply. People thought I was a good match. I applied. I interviewed with my now co-director at the time. She was my boss, but I interviewed with her. She and the other person liked me, and so I came on. But you know what? I want to stop and say something. Being incarcerated by itself, I don't care if you did 3 years or 30 years, does not make you an organizer, don't make you an activist, it don't make you an advocate, it don't make you nothing but formally incarcerated, right? So there is a bridge that you have to go from your experiences and using them to getting all the information about the systemic issues and understanding how to be an organizer. And that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, because there are so many people out here who are formally incarcerated and they swear they organizers and activists and out here fucking up, just keeping it real, right? They're moving in ways that are not community based, that are not comradeship, that are not organizing, because all they have been is in prison. And so you have to like understand. So I started learning. I started learning about the death penalty. I started learning about how to be an organizer. I went to community meetings, and I'm in St. Louis, so this is Ferguson. This is ground zero. So I started going to organizations that were created after Ferguson, going to their community meetings, learning about what they're doing. So I really like became a student of the movement, so I can be effective and use my own story to become an organizer. And so that's kind of what I've been doing over the years. Really,
so is that right?
So,
I'm sorry, but just quickly, you were locked up when Michael Brown was killed. Is that, am I getting that timeline right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. So, I got out in 2015.
So when that happened and all of that popped off after that, what was the reaction within the prison that you were in? Was there a reaction?
But listen, prison is a microcosm of the society, right? It's just a smaller society. Racism exists. All the isms exist in prison. And when Mike Brown Jr. was killed, you know, the white women were walking around talking about he did this. And even when Trayvon was, I remember when Trayvon was murdered, they were like, oh, you know, he had on a hoodie and he just all the things. So it was a lot of tension even in prisons. I'm sure it was worse in men's prisons, right? But it was definitely a lot of tension in women's prisons. White women trying to explain away, you know, how he was wrong for whatever. And a lot of people in prison, you would think they would be anti-police and anti-system, but they almost go to prison and like feel like they have to like be subservient to the system in order to get out and in order to have an easy time in prison. So it was a lot of subservience to the system of people incarcerated. And so, yeah, it was a lot of tension inside. It was a whole lot of tension. My son was actually a year older than Mike Brown Jr. And he lived not far from Ferguson, like the next suburb over. My son lived with his grandmother. So I'm panicking because, like, you know, it was a lot going on, and I don't know where my kid is. He caught the bus from school because I wasn't there, so he had to catch the public bus. And I finally got a hold of him, and it was, you know, we were looking at the TV trying to figure out what was happening. It was a lot going on at that time. It was a lot of tension. You know, I felt so horrible because, like I said, and interestingly enough, my son resembles Mike a lot. Like, he was a big, dark-skinned kid, right? So that could have been my baby. That could have been any of our kids. So that's really one reason why that still to this day, like, affects me a lot. Because I see my son in Mike Jr. But yeah, it was a lot of tension inside doing that, and all the other George Floyd doing all the things that happen out here. It reverberates inside.
Oh yeah. That's why. So was that helping also to propel you to where you are now? Were you thinking already then, this is why I got to keep doing what I'm doing, and that transition that you're talking about others don't make? How was it that you made it in terms of going from just being formally incarcerated to being a more credible activist spokesperson for that struggle? Were there people or groups that said, hey, ML, let me pull you this way? Or did this just, I don't know, somewhat self-generate?
I think that you have to definitely be determined on that path, right? Because you can bring a horse to water, you can't force him to drink. So you definitely have to be determined. But the thing is too, and if somebody else said this to me recently, you have to be an organizer inside in order to want to be an organizer outside. A lot of people inside are not organizers. Now, there are some great incarcerated organizers. There are, right? A lot of folks, trying to, hold the system accountable, trying to help other people that they're around. But if you weren't a person inside that was doing that, if you were just trying to do your time, quietly, you weren't challenging, I'm going to say the prison system, you weren't writing stuff up. If you weren't doing none of those things, you didn't, feel that pull to be an organizer and to change the prison. Even if you complain, people complain about the stuff going on all the time, right? And when people complain, I'll be like, okay, don't do it. Like we got this one interesting situation. We got this phone list. People do too much. They just be on the phone for extended periods of time because they ain't got no home training. So people were complaining about people being on the phone for hours and hours and not getting off the phone, let other people use it. So the prison system at our prison decided to make a phone list. So you had to sign up for these 15-minute blocks of phone time. Now, people got jobs, people go to medical, people doing stuff, so you can't necessarily be right on that phone at the 15 minutes. And one time, this lady, she had a 15-minute block of time, but she got called to medical for whatever reason. So she told a friend, hey, you go get on the phone because I'm finna go to medical to see the doctor. And that other friend got wrote up because she was on the phone with somebody else's phone time. So it was a lot of issues. And I understand the reasoning for, doing this because it was complaints, but their solution was not helpful, right? So people complaining. So I said one day, well, don't sign the damn list. When they put out the list to sign up for 15 minutes, don't nobody sign it. That way, and can't nobody get in trouble because ain't nobody on the paper, right? Simple to me. I got in trouble for that. I was accused of inciting a riot because I didn't make anybody not sign it. I just suggested nobody signed it. It clicked. Nobody signed it. And so the next day, the officers want to know why nobody signed the phone list. And then everybody looking at me. So if you're not
but how again, they seem to keep skipping steps when it comes to you. How does that go from I made a suggestion to inciting a riot?
Anytime you get a group of people to follow one path or one idea or whatever, you're that's what I was like, riot, But anytime you get a lot of people to like do something or not do something, I mean, we talk, Dr. Burton wrote about it in Tip of the Spear. Anything you trying to uprising, anything at all, they're gonna tamp it down. So that's kind of what happened. I was like, well, I guess, I didn't know, I just told people not sign the paper, but like I said, but if you're not trying to use your voice and do that inside, you're not going to have the bug to do it when you come out here. But I had that bug, and a lot of other people do. I know some great formerly incarcerated organizers, but everybody out here formerly incarcerated didn't have it. It's just a money thing because people give formerly incarcerated people money and be you kind of be the face of whatever the movement or organization is, and so that's why they're doing it. And like I said, they're more harmful than they are helpful. But it's definitely, you start with that. You have to be determined. You have to want to do this and want to help other people, not just help yourself. You got to want to help other people, and so that's always been me. So so I did the law library thing. I helped people with their cases and other issues. Like I said, I was always writing some stuff up. I don't care. People like, why you writing it up? Because I ain't got nothing else to do because I'm in prison. Because what else you got to do? So I would write things up, and I won a couple of my I run a few of them, so and I just determined when I came home, I was going to, fix this, at least try, I'm gonna try to fix it. So that's kind of how I went from doing that. And when I got this job I have, I said, I need to know what I'm talking about. I need to know what I'm doing. Like, I can't just be, even when I did the interview with my co-director, I said, I'm not just going to be the face of this and not actually make no decisions or know what I'm talking about or know what I'm doing. I'm not just going to be the figurehead, right? That ain't me. So, and I said, I'm going to do the work, right? But I'm just not going to be here just for appearance's sake. So I started doing the work, doing the research, learning about not just death penalty, capital punishment, lynchings, what I'm saying, historic things that are happening today. The first book that radicalized me, interestingly enough, was an autobiography of Geronimo Pratt. And I read Geronimo's book. I loved it. I did not know Johnny Cochran was about that life, right? I only knew him from OJ, right? So when I read Johnny Cochran was like, You know, I was like, okay. So yeah, so that kind of
Johnny
started.
actually. Johnny had a wild career. He did a lot. So yeah.
He did. He was very much one of those radical attorneys, you know. So I read that book. I read a few others during that time as well. I think one of the first other books I read was about a young man in New York named Yusuf Hawkins, I believe, who was murdered in New York.
Absolutely. Immortalized in a lot of classic rap tracks too. Shout out to Chubb Rock and them. Sorry.
Yes, I read all of that. I just, you know, delved myself into that. I started when I was incarcerated, right? But I kept going. Mumia wrote Jailhouse Lawyer's Handbook. So of course I got into that too. So I just wanted to make sure, like, when I'm in front of cameras, when I'm doing my work, I am a force. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. And I'm here to actually make a difference. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And, you know, since
so by the time you came out, you were clear on this point. In other words, you were saying, I want to more or less hit the ground running. I'm going to head in this direction and prepare myself as okay. All right. Right on.
Now, I will say this. I had to get a regular job now. Back in 2015, 2016, I worked at a company, basically an insurance company. But interestingly enough, the people that own the company in our prisons, like churches go into the prison on Sunday to have church service. I don't know if that happens everywhere, but that happened here, right? And so every Sunday for, like, you know, 3 or 4 months, 2 or 3 churches will come in, then they'll rotate churches to some other churches going in. So when I got this job, one of the owners, I asked him something about what he was doing this weekend. He's like, oh, you know, my church, we go up to the women's prison and do service. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. I say, you know, that's the prison I was in. You know, he's like, no, I didn't know. So they were actually, like, you know, saying very open to me, my story, and, you know, going into the prison. So because of that, they gave me a lot of, I ain't gonna say leeway because I still did my job, right? But they gave me time to also do this. Like, I would take off of work and go to the state capitol. I would take off and do other things, but I still did my job. But it was an environment where I was able to do that because they knew where my passion was. I know I talked to the folks that owned the company, and they were actually, like, you know, understanding of these issues. And this was a white man also, but he definitely was like, yeah, years ago, his dad had got into some trouble. He's like, yeah, I just dedicated my time to go into the prison and support people. So I landed in a really good company, and I was there for about 3 or 4 years, but I was doing this on the side until I actually got a quote unquote job in this work that paid the bills. So that's kind of how I transitioned from prison to where I am now.
I often ask people when we have these interviews who have been locked up, what is, if anything, they would ever want to clarify, given the chance, to in terms of the media representation of prisons. So a lot of people will, you know, only interact with the incarcerated experience through a TV show or a movie. You know, I'm thinking of women in prison. You know, obviously Orange is the New Black was the big thing for a minute, stuff like that. Is there anything that you often, you know, like that you do or would want to say when you see these things?
I definitely do. Well, first, I hate them all. I just hate all of those. I do. I hate them all, from the Prison Wives to the Orange is the New Black to all of the shows. They do this, not just that the media gonna distort things anyway, right? So I do dislike all of those things. You know, I will say this, I wouldn't change my experiences, because it not only has it gotten me where I am today, but like the people in my life. I met some amazing people incarcerated, some still mentors of mine, you know, that I have right now that I still communicate with. I've learned so much. I actually met a person when I was incarcerated. She had a story. It was this lady, they were Muslim, and their daughter was dating a black boy. They were teenagers, and it was a big story in my city, and they killed their daughter for dating this black boy. A huge story. And I felt some kind of way about the people, because when I was a little kid, they owned a convenience store.
Wait a minute, the family killed their own child?
Yeah, the dad and the mom. Yeah, because she was dating a black boy, and in their religion or whatever, you weren't supposed to do that. So, and they thought she was, I guess, thought she was having sex. I don't know what she was doing, but they did kill her. And at the time, I held a lot of, like, because they had a convenience store. When I was a little kid, I went into the store to buy candy, and their teenage daughter was working the counter. So I knew her. I didn't know her well, but I knew who she was. And I held a lot of, like, animosity and things towards the mother, right? Because I didn't understand. And when I was in prison, I met her. She actually was in a wheelchair, and I said a couple of times I had to push her back and forth in her wheelchair. And I actually got her story. Like, I got to know her. I got her story. And I understood that because of their culture and where she came from, it was expected of her to go along with whatever her husband did and said, even if it was demonizing her daughter and killing her daughter, right? So it was just how she was raised, etc. So, like, that really taught me not to be judging people, and, you know what I'm saying, really, like, understand cultures, systems, all of those things. And her name was Maria Isa. She's passed away now. So, like, that existence and that experience really taught me, like, about empathy and compassion, and, you know, I said, understanding our systemic issues. So I would not take it back. But also, it's not an easy place to be. I mean, it is punishment. It is separation from your loved ones. It is a place where their goal every day is to break you down and dehumanize you and break your spirit and break who you are, right? So they can control you. And so all of those things existed simultaneously, right? So I definitely tell people that there are some very smart folks incarcerated. There are some very wise people. There are some very interesting people who are incarcerated. But there's also a situation in prison where they make sure, the system and the media make sure that you see none of that. That the only thing you see is exploitation and violence. And those things are not necessarily everything. It is very much, you know, it's a, you know what I'm saying, it's a lot of grays of being incarcerated. But I would not take it back. You know, at the time when I was there, I would take it, you know what I'm saying? I was like, I hate this, etc. But, like, today,
right.
I know that, like, being in those spaces with those people. Now, we'll say this: there are people who say prison helped them, and prison, you know, made the better people. No, don't. It is the community you form. And I want us to get to a place where we form those communities out here. We shouldn't have to go to prison to find a community, to find a group of people who we can relate to, who can support us, because that's what happens there, because you ain't got no choice. Like, it's life or death, and you got to, you know what I'm saying, make sure you get around people and love on them and support them, and they support you. We should have that out here. I shouldn't have to be incarcerated for that. So I won't say that prison saved me or helped me, but I will say that the experiences and the people that I met taught me so much. And I think that that's what, so those prison wives and all those silly shows about relationships and love, we need to have some shows about organizing in prison, you know what I'm saying, and what the systems actually do, and really, like, the people doing the work on the inside. I would really like that to be more the center than this salacious, dramatized, you know, mess that we look at today.
No, that's real. You know, I never mean to demean the prison experience, but I can't help when I hear people talk about, I mean, there's so many things that parallel with how I felt in the military, and including how the military is depicted in film and everything else. It's just, and that last point in particular, I knew, I was conscious of it at the time. I am losing my humanity in this space. Like, I'm becoming a worse person in every way. I got to get out of here. And so, but I also said the same thing. Like, looking back, it did prove to be an important lesson, and I can say it helped, but at the time, you know, I just wish, why is it necessary to go through all that?
Right.
Exactly. Like, I would have much rather gotten those lessons without all of that. So I really feel that when I hear that, you know, so okay, so you come out, you hit the ground running, and then can you just talk a little bit about that part to where we get to today? The you know, how did you get into the work, and what was the path to MADPMO, etc.? Yeah.
Sure. So I was organizing for a few years with this one organization that taught me about legislative advocacy. So talking to people in your community or going to meetings is one thing, but when you go to them state capitals and you deal with when you deal with white supremacy close and in person, right? It's a whole other situation. So I was working with an org that took me to the Capitol, that taught me about organizing, how to read a bill, how to write a bill, like what it meant, testifying, the process of legislation. And that was very invaluable as well. And I went from not wanting to even speak to like when I walk in these days, I won't shut up. So I started doing that early on. And but like I said, in 2020, when I got this particular job opportunity, and like somebody just called me, was like, "Hey, this organization is hiring for an organizer." Now, when I read a job description, it said prefer a bachelor's degree, right? I don't have a college degree, and I was like, I don't think they're gonna want me because I ain't got a degree. But my friend was like, "No, you need to interview anyway. Like, I think you'll be great." So I did the interview, got hired, and so just started that process and learned for the first probably 2 months of me working there. I read transcripts, I read case files, I read, motions, briefs filed in different cases. I read everybody on death row. I read their cases, who they were, what they in there for. I just literally took like 2 months and just immersed myself in the death penalty. And it wasn't easy reading, some situations are horrible, right? So it definitely wasn't necessarily easy, but I needed to, take that on. And then after that, part of our work is amplifying people on death row, not just in times like right now with Khalifa, because he has an execution date, but overall. So we support people who are in prison on death row, their family members, whatever support they need. So that connection and that outreach is very important to our organization as well. So I started, we got a little email system. It's called Securus. And I got on the email system. I started, reaching out to the folks on the roll. Most of them wrote me back, right? And I started having relationships. And interestingly enough, Khalifa was the first person I reached out to because he's from St. Louis, and so I was like, well, let me connect with the St. Louis folks first. And, we connected. He called me. I sent him my number. He called me. And, we just started talking. And most of it was not about prison. Most of it was about, his family or, just his thoughts on society, etc. He's also Muslim, so his faith. Now, I'm not really, religious or anything. So that's something I don't, I can't really claim or don't have a lot of knowledge in. So he always tells me things about faith and not necessarily religion, but just like having some kind of spirituality. So I did that and started connecting with folks. And the next year, the first execution that I was here for in 2021, a man was executed who had an intellectual disability. He had fetal alcohol syndrome. He had 20% of his brain missing. Like he had a brain tumor in prison and they took out 20% of his brain. And his name was Ernest. And he had a mentality of an 8-year-old. So if you talk to him, even though he was like 50 years old, he was very childlike and he was very sweet. So that was the first case I worked on. And I did get pretty attached just because of like reading the lives of these people. They didn't have easy, lives and histories. They didn't have a lot of help, etc. So just reading what he went through in his path just touched me a lot. So I got pretty wrapped up in that case. He was executed October 5th of 2021. And it was difficult. It was definitely a hard situation. And but it taught me a lot of lessons about like doing this work. You can be detached and you can look at it purely from a work perspective, but that's not going to really get me anywhere. So I definitely make sure that I stay connected to the humanity. And that's one thing about me. I always amplify people's humanity. And now Khalifa's not guilty, but even when a person is guilty, they are still humans and they don't deserve to be.
So then what do you do? So how do you deal with that then? If you're not detached and you actually give a damn and have a connection. So what strategies do you do to not lose it all, to keep it together?
Tequila is a friend.
it's terrible because as you said that, I'm looking at my Uncle Nearest bottle right over behind the thing. Like I'm not, so that's but yeah,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
but I still feel
But
like we should not
right.
we should advocate other coping strategies and mechanisms.
Yeah,
But
I do
yeah, I
have
hear
others.
you. I
Yeah.
hear you
Yeah.
though.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
real.
a good martini every now and again definitely helps. But I think that how do I cope? So one thing is community, right? In a death penalty movement, I have a community. So so the death penalty issue at one point in our history was very white led, right? Remember when that movie Dead Men Walking came out years ago with Sister Helen? So during that time, it was like the late 90s or whatever it was. A lot
With Sean
she was
Penn
the
and
real
what you call
person.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So she started touring the country, right? With the movie and talking about the issues. So most of the people in those rooms were also white, were also religious, right? So these organizations like mine kind of formed the groups around, that issue when Sister Helen kind of started pushing it out a lot. And so for a long time, it was religious and white led, and focused, right? But who on death row? Black folk, people of color, Latinos, Hispanic people, Native Americans, even white people, they're poor, right? And so there was a point after Mike Brown, after George Floyd, where the leadership, a lot of the organizations, like, you know what? I think we need Black people in these movements. I think we need to hire Black people. I think we need Black people in these organizations. And so that's when I kind of started hiring Black folks. So when they did, one of the people that was hired, she decided to create a group, and we're called the Leaders of Color. And so it is not a whole lot of us, probably 30 people across the country, Black folks that are not as Black. We have Native American, we have, people of color in our movement, but we meet, we convene, we talk, we vent, etc. So a lot of that camaraderie helps us all, because like we can now, and a few of us are formerly incarcerated, most are not, but probably 3 or 4 people are like me, formerly incarcerated. So a lot of my coping is definitely because I have people, I have a tribe, I got a community, and they're very supportive. And like right now, 4 of us have been doing this panel discussion. We've been going to different conferences, doing a panel discussion called From Cop Cities to the Death Chamber. And we're talking about the connections between all the state violence, from creation of cop cities, death penalty, etc. So we've been doing that since this summer. But yes, I have a great group of people that I do work with who are amazing, and we do it together for the most part, right? So I think that's a lot of coping. If you don't got a community, if you don't got people you trust in your movement, and like, I feel like this: if we can't go to war, you can't be around me. That's kind of, my thoughts, right? If we, because one day it might come, and I mean like physical war. I'm just saying, like, going war with the system. If you can't go to war, what are we here about? So I have that community. Other than that, my other folks, like local, my St. Louis people, Kansas City people, I got a lot of organizers that I'm really close with. We support each other. One of my good friends is in Kansas City, and we talk about everything. So I really think having people around you, being able to, I know self-care has become this like buzzword, but like making sure you are taking care of yourself, even if that means going out to dinner with 3 or 4 of your comrades and like talking and, doing all those things. So that helps me so much, just being around my people. That really re-energizes, my strength. So I think a lot of it definitely is how I cope. Then also kind of being alone sometimes. I'm one of them people, I'm actually an introvert. I know people wouldn't believe that, but like I be at home. If I'm not at work, I'm at home. So, just being with myself, thinking, reading, I read a lot, thinking, trying to strategize, trying to figure out how to move the needle towards the abolition of the death penalty in our state, how to get federally, how to get, whoever the president is, not to be killing folks on federal row, because I got some people on federal death row too. So, some just like strategizing around this. So instead of like taking my emotions and allowing them to like break me down, I take them and I use them for my passion and my drive. And I like, create programs and strategies and things like that to where push our work forward. So that's kind of how I cope,
That's what's up. And real quick, you mentioned it you mentioned Securus and Orasami Burton's book, and as he reminds us, today's prison tablets are on the cutting edge of carceral war. Privately owned digital communication firms such as Securus Technologies and Global Tellink are increasingly flooding carceral systems with app-filled devices specially designed for prison contexts. Although these tools are publicly marketed as bringing fractured communities together, these communities employ predatory pricing strategies that extract scarce financial resources from already vulnerable communities and are rapidly replacing physical letter writing, which, as I have shown, is a central terrain of anti-carceral revolt. These technologies are also facilitating new forms of surveillance and control. As GTL notes in its website, deployed in facilities across the country's tablets offer more than just entertainment. They can help modify behavior, enable communication, and increase facility security control, and operational efficiencies. So
all of that is very true, very, very true. And so I mean, I got the book soon as it came out, and I bought a whole lot of that book at this point. I bought many copies, giving them away, etc. It is very true. The tablet situation is like, well, first of all, in our state, since the tablets came out in 2022, they stopped physical mail. So you cannot send your loved one a letter at all. It's not an option. You can't do it at all. So you can email.
What about packages then?
They stopped that too. They stopped.
So if you want to send them a book, it's got to be a PDF.
You can't just. Okay, that's not true. Okay, you can send a book. You will have to copy and paste the text into the Securus thing, and the word limit or the character limit on each email is like 3,000 characters. So when I'm sending like even legal briefs or statutes to my partner, it takes like 5 emails to send the whole thing because it's got a character limit. So but no books. You can't order books. Now 2022 in our state they stopped the mail. In 23 they stopped books from being ordered. And I asked why, because I'm trying to understand. This is what they told us, Dr. Ball. We are hijacking Amazon packages, opening them up, putting drugs in them, resealing them, and sending them into the prison.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I said that's interesting.
That's an amazing. Well, that's highly sophisticated operation that they cracked open over there.
Right. But despite that, though, like I said, mail in 22. Books, magazines, newspapers, they stopped it in 23. This past weekend.
So there's nobody can get a book? Or is there another way to get to a book? Does the prison bring books in that they sanction?
Well, you have to order it yourself. So like I can put money on my family member's account and they have to order the book themselves, but there ain't a whole lot of places to order no book. There's not they have a little catalog which has like Moby Dick, The Bluest Eye, got like historic books in it. There ain't no legal books. There's no up-to-date books. There's nothing you want to read for real. It's like historic books written 30 years ago, and it's like a little catalog. But you have to send your family the money, and they have to order it themselves, which is a whole mess of a process. But I was going to say, since they stopped it, right? They stopped letters and they stopped books, but they say we was the one sending in the drugs. This past weekend, I got a message that in one prison, 5 people overdosed and they shut down the whole prison. They put them on lockdown. 5 people in one day overdosed. So I'm thinking to myself, well, how did people get the drugs in if we were sending the drugs in the books and now we can't do that in the mail? Where the drugs?
And Amazon is relatively new. So am I to understand that before Amazon, the prisons were drug-free spaces?
Not that I know of, right? But that's what they're saying.
Wow. And somehow when they cracked open this sophisticated ring of dope, still got in there enough to kill 5 people. Wow.
Yes, it's still. This year I got the I get the death logs of our prison monthly. I try to get it monthly when they answer my sunshine requests, which they don't necessarily answer it all the time. But the last one I got up to the end of August, 96 people died in Missouri prisons. Overdoses, medical conditions, whatever. A lot of them are overdoses, though. I would say probably out of that 96, probably 70 or 75 of people who died of overdose. So where are the drugs coming from now? Like, they don't have no answer about where the drugs coming from at this point, because y'all stopped every means to get in. It's always been the staff. It's always been the people that work in the prison. It's always been that, right? They don't want to talk about that. So now they have these tablets where you can't really get, any, I say good book, like something educational. You can't get that in. They have like solitaire and what's that one game, Sims? They got like little games on the tablet.
The video
so it's
game?
Something,
yeah.
So it's definitely a mind control thing. You know what I'm saying? They got movie. You can order a movie, right? The newest movie come in, you can order $7.99. I think how much a movie costs. So it's definitely to take your money, and it's definitely to, turn people incarcerated into more zombies than they may already be. So
I just saw a story about high schools doing this with tablets that they give the students, and then they put they're basically surveillance devices that's supposed to keep kids focused and this, that, and the third. But the kids are all reporting that just what you said. It's making me not want to participate. I know I'm under surveillance. It's sort of depressing, and I don't engage, and I just want to put my head down on a desk. I don't want to even participate because everything is I can't go to this website. If I go to this website, it's going to be misinterpreted, or I'm going to get in trouble, or so it's just what Ori is talking about in this book, what they do in there. And you made the point yourself, what they do in there is being brought out here in its own version to get the rest of us.
It's always like that. It's very much always that control, and and then the tablets is not connected to the internet, so I know internet on it. And half the time it don't even work. Like, you can also they have a phone app on the tablet. Half the time it don't work. So it's just frustration. It's just taking people's money. It's just surveillance. And it doesn't help anybody. And stopping, physical mail, like Dr. Burton said, meant something. Like 2 years ago, a person was upset because his grandson, who was like 7 or 8, drew him a picture, right? And they mailed it in. He can't get it. You can't even get your kids' colorings. You can't get anything that's really attached to your family. Now, if you mail a letter, you have to mail it to this processing center in Tampa, and they scan it in and put it on your tablet. But like, when you scan stuff, especially half of it cut off, all type of stuff be happening to them scans. So that's the only way to get in any information is through the tablet. So it has that's why people in prison are doing drugs and are, they're depressed. You know what I'm saying? They're tired, they're hopeless, etc. They don't have anything that is actually enriching their life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, listen, so as we just sort of head to a close here, I did want to come back again to the work you're doing now, and have you talk a little bit about that, and including obviously a reminder about this effort to free Khalifa. And obviously, if there's anything that you meant to add that I'm not inviting you, please just go ahead. But could we talk about where this work you're doing now, sort of broadly speaking, and then we can focus in on Khalifa in particular, and we'll reiterate the call and remind everybody who the links are in the show description. But yeah.
So the work that I'm doing mostly focuses on the death penalty, and I just clarity's purposes is Missourians to abolish the death penalty. I am the co-director. And our work of the death penalty, it definitely is amplifying people like Khalifa, but it's also the other grudgery that ain't, out front all the time, or there's not like, you don't see it. So it's going to the state legislature. It's trying to get, the electeds to understand that the death penalty doesn't work. It's having events in our community. I do a lot of tabling. I do a lot of speaking at churches or universities. So it's very much just that everyday being in community and or being in the state legislature and pushing these issues and getting more people to understand why capital punishment don't work and what we can do better. We all, one of my comrades, organizations, their logo is "We keep us safe." So trying to figure out how, as a community, we can keep ourselves safe, and we don't need these systems of punishment, especially capital punishment. So that's kind of the work that I do, like I said, in the death penalty space.
And could you say a word or two about that before we get to the end? Also, I know I'm interrupted again, but the fact that the death penalty does not work, the claim that it is some deterrent. Could you just speak a word or two to that? Yeah.
There's no statistic. There's nobody that ever interviewed a person who killed somebody, and that person said, "I knew I would get the death penalty," or that has stopped somebody from killing somebody. Because if you're doing something like that, it's passion, or greed or whatever the situation is, but you're not thinking of consequences. So there is nothing, no studies, no statistics that say death penalty solves anything. It makes more victims. So it makes victims of the family of the person who is on death row. And here's the thing too, a death sentence, a capital case, just the trial, the appeals, and now all that process, it costs more money than putting somebody in prison for life. It's estimated to cost $1 to $2 million for a capital case. From the start of it to the execution, it costs up to $2 million each case. Each case. So the states are saying we ain't got money for Medicaid, we ain't got money for child care, a Head Start, we ain't got money for this, but y'all got money for $2 million to kill one person.
It's the same thing. It's the same, like the whole so-called pro-life argument. We want to make sure you get here, but then that's it. And then if you mess up, we'll take you out. We'll definitely take you out.
Exactly. So it does not help anybody. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help the victim's family. Also, I talk about the victim's families a lot because they matter, of course, but being drugged in the court for 20 years, because every time a person on death row has a court hearing or any kind of, motion in court, a lot of times the state would bring in the victim's family because they want the people, the judge, to see them crying, etc. And they're re-traumatizing these people. I've been in hearings where on the like the flat screen, the projector, they put up the pictures of the murder, bloody bodies and stuff. And the people have been dead 20 years ago, so now their family got to see they bloody shot up body again. Why? For what reason? Right? So it's re-traumatizing family members. It costs so much money that people don't have. It's a flawed system, right? Innocent people like Khalifa. As of July 1st of this year, the 200th person has been exonerated from death row in this country. 200th person. I believe he was out of Texas, I believe, I'm not quite sure. But there have been 200 people exonerated, and it's estimated that out of every 8 people that have been executed, 1 of them was innocent. So the system is flawed because we're killing innocent people as well. So for all of those reasons, we don't believe, the capital punishment system works. It's not something that helps anybody, victim or not. They're still going to, grieve for their family members. And I think that when I've heard some capital punishment cases and read some things, what I think happens is the prosecutor or the cops, because when a person is killed, it's their family's grieving. It's a horrible situation. So in order to comfort the family, the prosecutor and the cops, they put this idea in their head. I've seen cases where the cops or the prosecutor have met a family of somebody who was killed, and the first thing they said is, as soon as we catch the person, we're going to put them on death row. Why you got to say that? Right? What is the purpose of you even putting that thought into their head? They weren't thinking that thought, right? They're grieving and whatever's happening with their family, but they are known to put that thought, as soon as we catch them, we're going to put them on death row. And that's what gets their wheels to turn, and that capital punishment, death penalty is final. It's not final, right? Because your loved one is still gone, right? Somebody else dying is not bringing your loved one back. So all of those things really is why the system does not work. And I know I talk to people who say, well, I believe in the death penalty, but just not Khalifa because he's innocent. Well, you shouldn't believe in the death penalty because it's a system. It doesn't pick and choose. It is just the way that it is, right? And we wouldn't be here today if just Khalifa, right? Because in 2 days, it might be Khalifa. So we need to understand, even those people that think they believe the system, they truly need to understand how the system does not work, and it is flawed, and it is not something that we should push, because any other system that had that kind of ratio, 8 to 1, killing innocent people, we wouldn't be pushing for it.
And people always say, or I hear it certainly in popular media all the time, that this idea that if we're at risk of killing one innocent person, we can't risk it at all, or whatever the phrase would be.
Yeah.
And here you are. It's not only are we. It's a given. It's 8 to 1 out of 8, and then with over 200 exonerated cases, and that's just, I'm assuming, involving relatively modern technology. In many of those cases, that wouldn't have been available going back however many years to however many people would have. I mean, so the numbers can't be. But this idea, now we're good with 1 out of 8. We'll be all right with that. Is just that's crazy.
It's crazy. There is a man actually facing execution in October, Robert Robertson. Remember the shaking baby syndrome thing?
Yeah.
So, it was everybody killing their kids from shaking babies. Now that's been debunked, right? That's not a thing.
I laugh at that. Just think,
it's ridiculous. But it is. But Robert Robertson is scheduled to be executed on October 17th because of shaking baby syndrome. Now, the experts today have come to court and said that's been debunked. That's not a thing. They made a mistake back then. This man still will likely be executed next month. So it's, what are we doing? What really are we doing? All right. And then one more thing I want to show you something. See on that black thing behind me, on that black poster on my wall?
Yeah.
That's a quote from Brian Stevenson of EJI, who did Just Mercy. And the quote says, it's not about the crime the person committed, right? It's about if we deserve to kill, right? It's not about if that person, some people do commit crimes, but as a society, as a United States of America, how do we have the moral authority to decide who got to die? Because if that's the case, we need to dig up George Washington, Jefferson, and all them folks, right? Because come on now. So it's like, why do we have the moral authority to decide who dies when this country has blood on its hands from the indigenous, enslaved people that have died, in this country? Who are we today to have the moral authority to kill anybody? And I like that quote. That's why I hung it on my wall, because like Brian Stevenson was so right. It ain't about if that person deserved to die. Do we deserve to kill anybody? And we don't.
Everybody's gonna have to forgive me, but that is.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
Listen, yeah.
That is a bar right there. Who are you? Who is you to say we got to put this person to, like, who? And then when you meet these people, like your point, when you go into these legislative buildings and you see people in their face, it is different than TV or in a newspaper or whatever. It is. It's you feel it. It's got the smell. It's got the symbolism in the buildings and on the walls. They got their favorite quotes and their favorite old white people in the fancy frames on it. And you in there like, it's
horrible.
And that airness of I don't give a fuck. Like they just don't care.
I hate our state capital is like the marble floors and the click clacking.
Yes.
It's just plantation. It's just plantation vibes to me. I just hate, but that's a part of my job. During session, I'm probably at the Capitol for 2 or 3 months, 2-3 times a week, right? And that's a part of the work. And it's trauma. I hate going. I really hate going up in there, but I have to, because if not me, who? Like somebody got to come in these buildings and speak about these issues, and that's what we do. But yeah, just dealing with these folks, these systems, it's just like it's very horrible. I
definitely salute to you for that. And again, just one more time for today, on the reminder for Free Khalifa. What is it that we need to be doing? And because again, by the time people see this, we're really on the clock. Please take it away with that.
So on Monday, the 23rd, tomorrow, there's actually a hearing in our state Supreme Court about Khalifa's case. So the people who are in Missouri, who can show up to Jefferson City, Missouri, which is our state capital, we are asking people to show up Monday or Tuesday to the Supreme Court or to the Capitol to drop off those petitions. And talking about petitions, we need people to sign it. And I know you put the link in, it's Free Khalifa petition. So asking everyone to sign a petition. asking people to call the governor of Missouri. His name is Mike Parson. You also have the information for that. So please call Governor Parson. I know his voicemail is full, and some people call, they get hung up on, but please keep trying. Tweeting to the governor, sharing the graphics. We have on freekhalifa.org, we have a folder for graphics. So we have a lot of, the graphics that we've been sharing. You can share that as well. So definitely share that also. And just, take all the actions that you can. And I know everybody's saying, oh, well, I can't do much. Whatever you can do is appreciated. If you can sign a petition, if you can, talk to your families. And that's a big thing, talking to your people. To family dinners, go to church, go to your universities, have these conversations, right? Because until we have all these conversations to get an understanding why this doesn't work and it's not helpful to any of us, we're going to keep perpetuating these cycles. So have those conversations. I do them a lot. So if anybody even want me to come on virtually or in person, they can reach out to me at MADPMO, MADPMO. And we do speaking a lot. I talk to kids. I talk to, college kids, even young kids. I've been talking to teenagers, junior high school students, because those kids are our future. So really talking to your family members, talking to your community about how we need to not only stand up for Khalifa, but also stand up for everybody that is on death row, that the system of capital punishment needs to be abolished. And that's overall my message. And freekhalifa.org. And I said, social media, MADPMO. Follow us, share, support. Anything you can do is truly appreciated.
No, right on. ML, thank you very much for the work, for joining us, for sharing your story a little bit. And definitely, as much as I hate the circumstances under which we have these builds, it is always a pleasure to talk with you. Yeah. So I hesitate to say I look forward to the next one because it's often associated with some other problem. But if I can somehow parse that out, I do look forward to talking with you, even under. I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I think
exactly. Whatever circumstances. I appreciate you all as well. I appreciate the platform, and I appreciate what you all are doing. So thank you also.
All right, everybody. Big shout out to ML Smith. Big shout out to Ezra Edelman. Black Jews. Big shout out, rest in power to Prince, and courage and strength to anybody and everybody that needs to make sure, whatever they need to make sure that we get to see that documentary. We put that energy out into the world, to the universe. Big shout out to all of you who were able to join us here this morning. Big shout out to those who were not and are seeing this later. Please make sure, again, you like, share, subscribe, support our Patreon, find ways to keep us going as we deal with this demonetized wilderness. It's all good. We're still finding our way with your support. Make sure you have the bell rung so you don't miss whatever is coming up on the platform. Tomorrow, I'll not only be on the remix, but then after the remix, I'm going to be jumping over to I Mix What I Like with a live featuring Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows to talk about Saturday Night Live's recent 50th anniversary and that cartoon that they banned back in the day. So come on and hang out with us for that as well. All right, everybody, let's free Khalifa and all of them, and all political prisoners, and those who will eventually become political prisoners will need our strength and our work and our efforts to free them as well. And peace, only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. And we'll catch you next time right here at
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.